everything that's been shared with me from other people that's good and helpful and healthy and wise has changed my life. And we can all be that for other people. So I would say don't give up hope. If you really are hurting, find somewhere to get help for yourself. You deserve it.
Hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host, Keegan, and this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And I've got a question for you real quick. Do you wish you could put the whole nation in therapy? I do too. And today's guest is Phyllis Leavitt. Today's guest is Phyllis Leavitt, and she is a psychotherapist with a ton of experience, and she wants to put the nation in therapy. So I can't really argue with her there. I think it's a great idea, but we kind of need to figure out who she is. So Phyllis, why don't you tell us all about yourself and what makes you want to put the nation in therapy?
Well, thank you so much for having me here with you today. I love the topic of your podcast because it's so broadly needed and interesting and needed by so many people. So yeah, working with so many people over the years, having been a client myself, dealing with a lot of dysfunction and trauma in my own childhood originally, which was actually the reason why I became a therapist, because once I did therapy, I really wanted to share the benefits of that with other people. So I've worked with hundreds of people over the years, families, individuals, adults, children, couples. And, it became so clear to me not long into my practice that not only are we not alone in our dysfunction, even though it can make you feel very isolated to have been hurt or dealt with trauma, we're not alone. We suffer together in our own little cubicles sometimes. And I think that it's important to know that we're not alone, and that the effects of trauma or addiction or whatever you've gone through are really very common among people. And I think it can create a feeling that I do belong somewhere, because I actually have a community of people that are trying to heal along with me. And that when we can share what we've learned along the way, it's the best, because none of us has all the answers by ourselves. But anyway, early on in that process, and over the years, it just began to dawn on me that all groups, and like businesses, schools, communities, and nations, operate on family dynamics. And we bring our mental health or our ill mental health to our participation in the larger groups that we're a part of. And, through no fault of our own, this is just the imprinting that we got. And if we learn to be aggressive as a way to survive, we're probably going to bring those aggressive tendencies to the workplace or school or church or, the community. We learn to be passive and submissive as a way to survive, we're probably going to bring that into our relationships as well, of all kinds. And so I began to see that many of the ways that our country works and the policies that we enact and the ways that we treat people are very much like what dysfunctional and often abusive families do to their family members. Ostracizing certain people, leaving certain people out, seeing them as inferior, targeting certain people for abuse or neglect, or, violence. And so I really, and so the point of my book isn't to point fingers, it isn't to blame, it's to say, how did we get here? How did we get to the place where the family of America has so many abusive tendencies and policies, and so many people are hurt and suffering and reenacting those same things? Again, in some ways through no fault of their own, and again, at the same time that we're all responsible for ourselves. So those two things kind of coexist. And how could the principles of psychology help heal our country? How could the ways we teach people to heal their own wounds, to communicate better with one another, to learn new skills that help them avoid violence when they're really upset, or self-harm when they're really upset, or addiction when they're really suffering? How can we, a nation, do the same things? So that's really why I wrote the book, and it's really bringing the microcosm of individual and family healing to a broader setting for use, making psychology available,
Yeah, kind of making it to where it's not quack science, right? It's not something that's looked down upon now, right?
Definitely not. And it really isn't quack science. I mean, you can tell anybody who, or talk to anyone who has really gone the, you know, gone the, done the journey, you know, and really
Uh-huh.
dived into their own pain and come out the other side with help from a supportive and knowledgeable therapist or friend or, you know, other healing kind of person, that it's worth it. That
Mm-hmm.
what you retrieve is your own essence. What you retrieve is your innocence. What you retrieve are your greatest strengths and gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing that can compare to that.
Yeah, that is for sure. And I think that that's some beauty in it, right? It's that we're trying to find the old us in a sense, but
Right.
at the same time, we can't really find the old us because that doesn't exist because it's in the past. So we kind of have to figure out how we got really messed up in the first place. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I would look at it this way. I think this is what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that part of good psychotherapy, as I have learned it and experienced it myself and done it with other people, is you do look into the past because we need to know what the formative elements are in our own psychic structure. We need to know what the role models are that we absorbed. Were they healthy? Were they unhealthy? Were they abusive? Were they neglectful? You know, how did our parents treat each other? What were the role models for men and women? What were the expectations? What were the rewards and punishments? And one of the big ones is, how did the families that we grew up in and the communities that we grew up in deal with conflict?
Mm.
Was violence okay? Was it condoned? Or did people really try to work things out and come back together or separate in peace if they really couldn't work it out?
Mm.
Because that's, I think, where psychological healing leads. Where it leads is the healing the relationship with ourselves and with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And for many, many people who really do some good work in therapy, they find themselves having much healthier relationships and much more able to leave relationships that are unhealthy for them.
Mm. Yeah, it's kind of getting power back in a sense.
Yes. Go
And
ahead. Yeah.
but what's that saying? With great power comes great responsibility, right? So how do you wield your self more responsibly?
You know, I'll tell you what I have found. I have found that in some instances, you kind of help teach people that. But
Hmm.
in a lot more instances, what I've seen is when a person has the opportunity to heal what hurt them
Mm-hmm.
and recover some of that essential self that they were, that got buried under layers of negative beliefs about themselves, um, poor role models for behavior, and poor coping mechanisms that they developed, which were the best they could do to survive. When a person has the opportunity to peel some of that back and actually find that essential self, they correct their behavior by themselves. They
Mm.
don't want to hurt anyone. They don't want to act out or act in, or when they have that impulse,
Mm-hmm.
they have more and more choice to restrain themselves from things that they know are destructive. We don't do it perfectly. Sometimes, you know, you yell and then you have to apologize. But there's an awareness that grows inside of what's healthy and what's not, and it becomes more of a guiding principle. Have you found that as well?
Yeah. It's uh how would I say that because for myself, whenever I went through therapy, I was kind of sitting there, I was like, I was asking my therapist, like, you're not really helping me come up with a solution. You're asking me more questions after you ask me a question. And she gave me a book, and it was essentially about how two therapists were talking about the client, or whatever they called it back then. They essentially will solve their own problems whenever you just help them get road obstacles out of the way. And in my experience, that's kind of how it's been too. And whenever I have that power back, for instance, whenever I have a clear road, I definitely don't want to hurt people. I don't want to do weird things. I don't want to do this, that, or another. But there's still times where I'm getting a little sidetracked or something, and it's usually because I didn't get something quite right, or maybe I'm relearning a different version of a pattern, and I'm just trying to rework that, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think there's room for both in answer to your question. I think when we do peel back the layers and do some healing of our own wounds, our coping mechanisms grow up, and they become more healthy, right?
Uh-huh.
And at the same time, there are skills that most of us didn't learn. I didn't learn any of the skills that I've learned since. I didn't learn any of them growing up. And so if you read books on nonviolent conflict communication skills,
Mhm.
right? If you get to practice in therapy with a partner, some of those, making I statements and reflective listening and asking for what you want instead of complaining about what you don't get. These are all skills we can actually learn from each other, from therapists, from other healers, from books. So
Mhm.
it's a combination of both. I think we kind of heal the core and then we learn something new, and we either learn it from ourselves or from other people.
Yeah.
It's all valid.
Yeah, and I love how you're saying that it's essentially once we heal ourselves, we kind of heal those around us too.
Right.
It's that ripple effect, chaos theory, whatever you want to call it. But in essence, whatever we're going to do to ourselves on the inside is going to reflect on the outside. And that's why the nation is just so kind of messed up right now, right?
I think so, because first of all, I think there's a lot of very unhealed people holding positions of power, and they have the authority and the means to act out their dysfunction and their wounds on other people.
Mm-hmm.
And the sad part is that one of the effects of untreated abuse for some people, not all people, but is a lack of empathy for others and a lack of ability to really want to feel the impact of their actions on other people. And when a person does that kind of healing work, they feel remorse when they hurt someone. They feel remorse for, and even sometimes for the way they've treated themselves. They feel sorrow for that and they want to correct it. And I think that's really what we're looking for. We're not looking for perfection. We're not looking for perfected human beings, because I think that's a long, long way off if it's possible. I think we're looking for people who want to be accountable and who will come back to the table and make amends and do it differently, but also stand up for what they need to stand up for without doing harm to other people. And that's a very fine line to walk. It takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of being willing to make mistakes and come back to the table.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure. And you bring up some really good points, because if the people in charge are the ones that are hurt, they're going to kind of normalize whatever, like you said, dysfunction that they're
Right.
dealing with. And then whenever it gets normalized down the road, I think that that's how trickle down economics is supposed to work, right? Like, however the top dogs are doing is how the bottom people should eventually be doing too. But it feels like this kind of psychological stuff works at, I don't know, 10 times the speed of anything else, really, because it's our mindset and our actions, right?
And that gets lodged in our psyches. It doesn't disappear. So if you're hurt by other people and you've learned from the role models in your family or your community or your leadership on a national level or on an institutional level, that it's okay to attack people, if it's okay to hate people, it's okay to kill people, it's okay to withhold resources from people, it's okay to blatantly, perpetrate injustice, then that's your role model. And we have a lot of young people growing up in the world today, here in America and around the world. And this is the role model they're seeing for what's acceptable. And that's why I call it the family of America. The family of America needs to heal. Just like if a family comes to therapy or gets into the judicial system because they've beaten their children, or they've sexually abused them, or they've kicked a kid out of the house and the child was homeless, if they come into the court system, yes, they might be held responsible for the things that they did that were hurtful and harmful. But in a healthy society, we also try to help those who have perpetrated injustice heal from whatever set them up to do it in the first place. And then you have a corrective system. And that's how you break the cycle, is you heal you heal not just the victims, but you heal the perpetrators as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the hard things to really do, though, because it's like, you hurt me or you hurt so many other people, like, you don't deserve to be feeling good, right? But in reality, everyone's a human. Everyone has their flaws and whatnot. I do think there are some things that are unforgivable, but there are definitely things that we can do as an individual or as a society to work around those things in the
Right.
long run, right?
Absolutely. And I think the more we're committed to some kind of social justice, even in the prison system, the more we're not going to have repeat offenders.
Mm-hmm.
How do you break the cycle on a national scale, on a community scale, on a world scale? You've got to be able to see the victim inside the perpetrator, even if that person still needs to be restrained or held responsible in a severe way for what they've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that makes sense because as a former alcoholic myself, I can definitely say I was the perpetrator on a lot of hurts, but in the same light, I was also the victim in a lot of ways. I was just twisting my own pain and throwing it on others, really.
That's exactly it. That's it. You hit it in a nutshell. And I think it's beautiful that you can say that from your own experience. And I think most people, and I'm not talking now about murderers or terrorists or the school shooters. I'm not talking about those people, although the same is true for them.
Yep.
But even, just the run of the mill people like me, I'm a run of the mill person, right? I had some severe abuse in my childhood. I didn't kill anybody. I didn't beat my children. But I've hurt people. We've all hurt people. We've all said things that were unkind, or we all missed the cues of how we could be more sympathetic. We've said things behind people's backs, whatever we've done, And so I think that's part of healing is to not only find the victim inside yourself and heal that part of you, which sometimes can be very challenging because it's painful, but it's also a sign of character and integrity to build that strength that you can also own your own lack of being a kind person or a helpful person or being an unkind person.
Yeah, you have a really good point. And I guess really the question that I have on that end would be, you were saying that it helps build character. So does that imply that it's only built after the fact? Or does one have to maybe build character before they're ready to take that dive into healing themselves?
I don't know if it's an either or. I don't. But I think before a person has a chance to heal, some of their coping mechanisms look like defenses. They wall off. They won't talk about it. They get angry. They blame other people. And it's all a defense against their own pain and not knowing how to take responsibility for their own actions without shame, because we're a shaming society. That's what we do. Instead of us all saying, who is without sin that could throw the first stone? None of us. None of us. And if we can really know our own humanity and our own flaws, then, and not make it so shameful to accept, our own, missteps and maybe harmful things that we've done, then we can pass that on to other people and we can create that culture. And therapy does that. Therapy is not judgmental. It's not about you're bad and wrong that you did that. It's like, how did you get there? What happened to you that made you react that way? Let's talk about that. Let's find that innocent little kid that got, locked in a closet or beaten or bullied at school or told he was stupid or whatever it was. Let's find that little boy, because there was nothing wrong with him, or little girl. There was nothing wrong with you. You were fine, and you had some really poor conditioning or bad limit setting or whatever happened to you. And unfortunately, in America today, a lot of the trauma that people suffer is not just in their homes. It's in their schools, it's in their community, it's bullying, it's racial profiling, it's racial discrimination, it's injustice, it's economic inequality that a person can't rise out of. And so the family of America really has to be factored into our individual well-being.
Okay, so here's a question. If we're talking about a family system of sorts, that's one of the things, is that whenever someone like myself, an alcoholic, or someone that has a very serious mental health issue, they're sitting there and people have tried to tell them time and time again, like, hey, you're trying to do this, you're messing up, you're doing this. And they can do it either well, bad, so on and so forth. But there's something that kind of works for some people. I know it doesn't work for me because it just pushes me into a corner, but that's an intervention. Do you think that like interventions would help certain people if like everyone just got together and said like, hey, we all see this, why don't you, like, there's a couple thousand of us.
I can't say that I'm an expert in interventions, but I have some experience with it. And what I would say is that an intervention, like any intervention, whether it's in a psychotherapist's office or between, man and wife or whoever it's between, but you're talking about a specific intervention for addiction. If the container around the intervention is, we love you and we want you to get well, and in service of that, we need to tell you the impact of your behavior because you're hurting other people. But it's not like shame, blame, and, what's wrong with you. It's really, and that's a difficult thing to do because, as you know, and I know well from my own experience, addiction can cause a lot of pain, a lot of pain for a lot of people. But, the bottom line of healing is we have to come back to love. Love is what heals. So if it's not an ingredient in what you're doing, it's probably not going to work.
Ooh.
You can whip people into better behavior, but you haven't healed them.
What's that saying? The whipping will continue until morale improves, right? It's from a video game.
Yeah, right.
But one of the things you said before kind of lead into what you just finished with, and that was that we're shaming society, we're shaming individuals, we're shaming people for just being human, for having little mess ups, little things here and there. And whenever those little mess ups happen, because people are shamed, that's a form of unlove, right?
Absolutely. And it's a horrible experience. If you've ever felt shame, whether someone shamed you or you shamed yourself, it's excruciating. There's something excruciating about that experience, and it doesn't heal. It makes us lock down into whatever our defenses are, being more pleasing, being more isolated, being more addicted, being more workaholic, whatever it is. It inspires us to try to protect ourselves with whatever defenses we can muster.
So whenever we get shamed, the defenses go up, which creates that negative feedback loop, which probably starts up whatever hurt someone else in the first place.
Right. Absolutely. And we see that on a, I think we are a very shaming society. And when I say the things that I say about our society and our culture, none of it's a blanket statement. There are wonderful people everywhere. People who are loving, who are kind, who are generous, who are philanthropic, who go out of their way for their neighbors, who apologize when they, do something wrong. But as a culture, I think we're a Colosseum culture. I think we like to see people suffer.
I mean, I would not disagree with you in that sense at all, because it seems that there is a sense of maybe entitlement, maybe something else, where people get their jollies, if you will, from looking at others and going, oh, at least I don't have that. At least I'm not going through that. I'm better than that. And I think that that's what kind of keeps a lot of people going, is because they look at others and say, well, I'm still above that. I'm not where they are, so I'm not doing too bad. Right. And it just kind of goes on.
I think there's another piece of it, because sometimes it's really about projecting our own shame onto other people. How often have you read stories where someone was, absolutely up in arms about some child being molested, and it turns out they're a molester, so they've taken their shadow and they've projected it out because they can't bear their own, their own guilt. And so I think I just really think for America to be in therapy, for us to be in therapy as individuals, as family, as communities, we have to celebrate people taking responsibility for their misdeeds.
Mm,
That doesn't mean not hold them accountable. If someone molested a child, that's a serious offense.
mm-hmm,
That's a life-changing experience for that child.
mm-hmm,
The devastation. So yes, we have to hold people accountable, but what if we said, what if we did something, some version of the truth and reconciliation model where we make it safe for people who have committed crimes or hurt other people to come forward and own what they did and hear the impact of their actions?
mm-hmm.
How else do we heal?
Yeah.
How else do we stop the cycle?
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I kind of had an idea of how we could do that as a society, it would be really cool because it'd essentially be like, hey, you're going through this, like fill out this little form, and we're going to have you go to this retreat place for a little bit to get your stuff back together, and you come back and you should be reintegrated back to where you were, right? But that's the thing, is that our society doesn't work that way, and it would take a total reform to get to the point of saying, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to admit you messed up. It's okay to come to a sense of repentance, if you will, right? But
And I think that's what healing does,
mm,
because, I think with all the therapy I've done, all the different healing work that I've done, I used to feel terrible shame when I did something that said something that I knew wasn't kind, and it just came out of my unconscious, right? You
yeah,
know, I don't think I'm a bad person, but I certainly said unkind things to people or did unkind things. Sometimes it was intentional and sometimes it really wasn't, but I did it and I could reflect on it. And it wasn't until I was able to do a lot of healing work that I actually feel like I want to be accountable for that.
mm,
Not comfortable to say I'm sorry. I don't think it's comfortable to anybody to just say, hey, but it's worse discomfort not to do it.
yeah. I would have to agree. One of my questions is, are you familiar with the 12 steps?
Somewhat. I haven't done them myself.
Fair enough. I don't think many people that are working a sober lifestyle or whatnot have experience with the 12 steps aside from hearing the 12 steps and maybe a step or two along the way. But what you're essentially nailing down would be steps 4 and 5 and then 8 and 9. So 4 and 5 is making your list of resentments, your fears, and all that stuff, and then admitting it to someone else while they help you see your errors.
Right.
And then 8 and 9 is sitting there saying, this is who I messed up to, and this is how I'm going to make it up to them.
Exactly. Exactly. And I am familiar with that. And I myself was not an addict, but I have had lots of addiction in my family. So
Mm,
I'm very familiar with it.
mm.
So yeah, I know what you're talking about. And you don't have to be an addict for those things to be very valid for your life, right?
Yep. I always kind of made the joke that I think everyone would get either along better or just have a better life if people worked the 12 steps one good time at least.
Right.
So,
Right.
but it's hard to really get that across to people. Like, if you do this, you will be better, and in extension, those around you will be better. So, how do we actually convince people to get into therapy or to do things to better themselves or to look out for other people too?
I think we just start with ourselves. I think you said something similar to this early on, which is the more you do your own work, the more you manifest differently in relationship with other people. You are more loving, you are more kind, you are more tolerant, you are more able to deal with diversity. You can handle conflict without becoming, highly aggressive or shutting down and closing up. Imperfectly at best, all of us, but you have more skill to navigate relationship. And I think you said something similar to this, which is something that one of my teachers in graduate school said that I never forgot. And that is that one person can change a relationship. If I don't grab the bait when you yell at me and I don't yell back, but I say, well, just tell me what you're really angry about. I can hear it. I'm willing to hear it. I would like you to stop yelling, but I'm willing to hear what your beef is with me. it's very likely that the other person will calm down.
Yeah.
And if they don't, you can say, I don't want to talk until you can speak to me in a different tone of voice, but I'm willing to come back when you're ready.
Mm. So one of the things I'm kind of hearing would be by living by example, right?
Mhm.
Leading by example, really. And also just kind of opening space for people in
Right,
the first place.
right, right.
Hmm.
And then I think that mushrooms out into who we are in the world. Like here you are, you're saying I'm a recovering addict and you're doing a podcast to help other people on their journey. And I think that's what happens when we go on a healing journey is we want to share. So we become a different kind of participant in our community, in our family, and in our nation, if that's our sphere of influence. But even if even if you're a different, more loving, more open person in your family, that's good. That's enough.
Yeah. And because it really does start at aside from the individual level, it would immediately branch out to the family. And
Maybe.
then family to, what would you say, coworkers? Or would coworkers be in that mix with family, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it can be anybody in your community of people that you interact with. It can be people you know, like the people you work with or the people in your church. Or it can be just how you treat somebody in a store or on a phone call. It can be how maybe you write a letter to your representatives, maybe you write an editorial in the newspaper, maybe you start a podcast, maybe you're like me. I had significant trauma in my childhood. I did a lot of therapy, and then I wrote some books about what I learned about my experience of a healing journey because I want to share that. And I
Hmm.
think the more we encourage people to heal and uncover their best selves, the more they're going to be the most stellar contributors to the people around them.
Yeah. Real quick, you did mention a book again and all that. Do you have a website that you'd like people to visit?
Yeah, I do. It's my name. It's www.phyllisleavitt.com. I don't know if your viewers can see the spelling there, but it's Leavitt.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of information about my book, America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis, which is taking all the principles that I learned from psychotherapy and looking at how that could be to bring our country to therapy and apply the best psychology to healing our divisiveness and our violence and our ideological divides and our prejudices and all of the rest. Basically bringing, in some ways, bringing conflict resolution skills to a country, but it's far more than that. Um, and on my website, there's links to how you can buy my book, and I'm not sure if it's there right now, but I will put it there. If you sign up where it says "Contact Me," you will get my newsletter, and I try to write really, thoughtful newsletters. And when you get the newsletter, you will get links to some free PDFs that I've created on identifying your conflict type,
Hmm.
principles for conflict resolution. Um, I made an audiobook of my book, American Therapy, that I'm going to offer for free. And all of those are available if you just sign in for the Contact Me on my website. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to, I'm not going to charge you anything. So, I just really want to share what I know.
Wow, that's awesome. And I thank you very much on behalf of anyone and everyone that will take advantage of that in the future and already has, because that is awesome. You're leading by example and you're living proof of what inner healing can do. So, what made you think that we could bring this to the national level? Because it's really hard to get it to an individual in the first place, right?
Right. I don't know that we can, but I believe in people. I believe that every single baby that's born is an innocent, beautiful, loving, pure being. And then we get written on and we have to undo the writing, right? So I think that people are essentially good. I think that when they're exposed to goodness, when they're exposed to the skills of how to heal themselves and how to help heal the world around them, that they want to. I've never met one person ever or worked with one person ever who wanted more hatred and violence in their life. if they had the opportunity for love and understanding and feeling valued and included and wanted. And when people have a chance to heal, they always become more loving. They never become more hateful and violent. They're healing from the violence. They're healing from the hate. They're healing from the dysfunction. So I guess what I think is that if enough people can do the work and learn the skills and get the perspective, and because I think we're missing that perspective, that our largest institutions, including government, operate like dysfunctional families in many ways, that then we have a chance to address it. It's just like if you can't identify the bacteria that caused that disease or that illness, it's really hard to treat. You're just going to treat symptoms and probably not that effectively. But if you get to the source, you can change, and heal. And I think that's true for psychology, and I think that's true for a person. I think that's true for a family, and I think it can be true for a country. So we're just in this together.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put that. I'm right there with you. I believe in people. I believe in the goodness of people, but it's really hard to sometimes whenever you can see the absolute monstrosities that can come out of nowhere and apparently lead a country. So that's one of the scary things, though, is that we're dealing with a lot of people in high places of power that are very hurt in some ways, shape, and form. And we're trying our best as a society right now to just kind of hold it together. So what do you think that people can do as an individual at this point in time to kind of maintain their own sanity?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, because I think a lot of people, and I don't have any numbers, I haven't done any research, but I think a lot of people feel like there's nothing they can do. And I think that's very sad. And so, part of my message is whatever you do counts. Whatever you do can have a ripple effect. You don't know who you're going to affect. You don't know, through your act of loving kindness or teaching somebody something new that's helpful and healing, what effect that's going to have on their life and who they're going to become in service of others. And so I think we have to keep hope. I mean, I know that I want to keep hope until I'm not here anymore. And I want to share that, because everything that's been shared with me from other people that's good and helpful and healthy and wise has changed my life. And we can all be that for other people. So I would say, don't give up hope. If you really are hurting, find somewhere to get help for yourself. You deserve it. And you're doing your own healing work, even if it seems really centered on you, when there's a society falling apart around you, it is in service of the whole. Everything we do to heal ourselves and help the people around us is in service of the whole. So don't think that anything you do is too small or insignificant. And I also like to say this to people, because not everybody can do therapy, can afford therapy, has access to therapy, or wants to do therapy. Do what you love. Do what you love, because that's a gift to you and to other people. If you love animals, be with animals. If you love to sing, sing. If you love art, do art. If you love science, do it. Because that ignites our own life force, and our life force is connected to love and belonging.
I love that, because it really just breaks it down back to getting back to love. Whether we are being loved or we are showing love in some way, shape, or form, even if it's to an activity, people can see that, they can sense it, they notice it. And one of the things that I'm also hearing is the compound effect is a real thing. I'm sure you've heard of that story, and if I try to say it, it's going to be really, really bad, but essentially, some guy is hitting a boulder a whole long time, and then someone sees him hit it one time one day, and it just cracks all the way through and everything, and they're like, oh wow, he's really strong. And no, he hit it a couple thousand other times every other day that you didn't see.
I haven't heard that story. That's a good one. And I wanted to just share this real quick, because in all my years being a therapist, and this goes back to the love theme, in all my years being a therapist, no matter what anybody's story is of what hurt them, what happened to them, what they suffered, what the dysfunction was that was role modeled for them, who they've become, what they've done, every single person's injuries can be traced back to some harm done to love and safe belonging. Every single one of us. Our wounds are to love and safe belonging. And the healing is to recreate love and safe belonging. And if there's one thing that could heal our country, it would be that. Not easy. It looks like a far cry from anything happening right now, but I think we need to know that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's, oh man, if we ignore that, it's just going to make it not only worse, but we're doing such a disservice that it will eventually implode, really, I think.
Absolutely. It's tragic. It's really tragic. We are our own worst enemy.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we tear ourselves apart and we're our own worst enemy, then no wonder that the nation's doing so bad, because we're all fighting ourselves and each other at the same time.
Right. And so we have to start somewhere. And so the theme of my book, and why I think it's so timely in this, in this age, is that we have to start at the microcosmic level, ourselves and our own families and the people we interact with, and the macrocosmic level, which is our larger institutions, because they're interacting all the time in a way that has never happened before in intensity, with all the social media and the technologies. I mean, it's we have to be able to decipher what's healthy for us and what's not, and begin to keep out what's not healthy and change it.
Yeah. And that's kind of the hard part, really, right? Because we're sitting here and we're helping. Well, I'm trying to not normalize, but other people are normalizing the pain and the hurt and stuff. And then whenever so many other people think that, oh, that's okay, and then you have the black sheep that go, no, that's actually not okay. It's really hard to fight that narrative.
It's really hard to fight that narrative. I talk about all these dynamics in my book. I talk about what are the dynamics that happen in this kind of a family structure that is dysfunctional or abusive. And I really spell them out for people so that they're easy to identify and understand. And what do? You play a different part. You just playing a different part, and I mean, for me, I think you just accept, okay, I'll be the black sheep voice because that's what's mine to do.
Yeah. I mean, in an essence, if no one will stand up for what is right and virtuous, who will? If you won't.
It's got to be you and me. And it's got to be you and me, because we can't ask other people to do what we're not doing.
Exactly. And I love that. Again, leading by example. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say one quick thing, and it's not guaranteed. I could lead by example. And for me, it's not like I'm trying to lead by example. I'm just trying to be the best person that I can be. If that affects you, great. If it doesn't, that doesn't mean I failed. I'm still doing what's mine to do. And there is no guarantee that anything we do is going to impact every single person in a positive way. But we just have to have the strength to keep going.
Yep. It's having the strength for ourselves, the faith for ourselves, and so on. It's honestly a really selfish thing, but in the end, it turns out to not be. Real quick, we've got a lot covered in this episode, but do you think that we could have you on in the future to kind of see how the state of the nation is after this episode? And so then we can kind of be like, hey, do you think that this had a ripple effect last time?
I'm very happy to come back. I will do whatever you would love to talk about. I'm there, so yes, this is my passion.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you for that. And with that being said, I think we're at a good spot to go ahead and hit the game show, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Alrighty. So, Phyllis, since your book is all about putting America in therapy, let's have some fun and put some everyday situations on the couch. I'm going to give you a quick scenario, and it could be personal or cultural or kind of silly, and you tell us if the patient needs individual therapy, family therapy, or group therapy, and maybe a little bit of why. Are you ready?
We're talking about America, or we're talking about a person? I just want to be clear what you're...
It's they're all kind of a little bit different.
All right. Well, just go for it.
Gotcha. Okay, so the family is arguing over Thanksgiving dinner politics.
That's happened in my family.
Guilty as charged.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Well, I love that question because, and this is very personal for me as well as I think global. Thanksgiving is about Thanksgiving. And it's so easy to forget that we could just sit and share what we're thankful for, what we're grateful for, and just share that with each other, and maybe even share our gratitude for each other or for the things we love about each other. And instead, we sometimes devolve into how we do it and who does what and who said what and who came late or whatever happened. And I think it's going back to the why.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we here? We're here to celebrate Thanksgiving. We're here to be grateful. So I think that's such a big context that I would say, like, sometimes you just have to expand out to the biggest perspective to bring us back to center.
Okay. So would you say that it would be individual, family, or group therapy that's needed at the end of that?
I would say family.
Family.
I would say really helping people learn new communication skills, nonviolent conflict resolution skills, distress tolerance skills, making I statements, reflecting back what the other person said to let them know you really heard them, even if you disagree, disagreeing without aggression, and having the desire to actually come back together in love as motivation behind learning all those new skills. Because most of us in arguments of that kind or any kind, I talk a lot about this, and I've talked about this in other segments and in my book. We all want to be right. We all think we're right. And the argument is, I want you to think I'm right. And I want you to know that you're wrong. And the other person feels the same way. They believe I'm wrong and they're right. And we're just at loggerheads with each other. So really, I think family therapy would be the model of really teaching people how to communicate in a different, more open, more accepting, more repair-oriented way so that they can come back together. And when that doesn't work, then I think what is required is probably more individual therapy to delve into the places where people get stuck and they can't do that kind of skill with each other.
Yeah, that's for sure. I like that. I really love the idea of focusing on Thanksgiving, and then I love it starting from the bigger and working all the way back down to the individual if need be. So, number 2, social media doom scrolling at 2 a.m. Do you need to go to individual therapy or family therapy or group therapy?
Doom scrolling at 2 a.m. I'd say individual. If therapy was what was called for because it's really a problem and it's affecting your life in a negative way, I would say individual. It's like, what's keeping you up at night? What is the fascination with the shadow side of human existence? What are you getting out of it? What's the after effect of it? I think that would be an individual inquiry.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. And how about whenever Congress is trying to agree on literally anything?
Well, I think I would say that right now the problem is that isn't the goal.
Okay.
That's the problem. So that's a family of America problem where the goal is not to work things out. The goal is not to hear different points of view. The goal is not to respect different points of view. The goal is to actually just win the argument one way or another. And so I think, I talk a little bit in my book, American Therapy, about what it would be like if we brought skilled mediators to Congress and really facilitated a conversation, facilitated the ruptures. And, when people call each other names or they storm out or they do whatever they do, that's really dysfunctional and that we would say was dysfunctional in our own homes or in a classroom or in an office building, that there's intervention that's designed to bring them back to their center and have them listen, not to shame them and blame them, stop them, but heal that kind of interaction on a deep level. or even not a deep level, if we're talking about Congress, to, to just point, the conversation or the agenda in a different direction for the good of the American family. And that's something I really stress, because when parents are fighting, it has a terrible effect on their children. And especially if they don't stop and it doesn't get resolved and it's very aggressive and it's frightening, children become highly symptomatic. And I think one of the things that's happening in our country is all of the great divides and the aggression that's being broadcast all over the news is having a terrible effect on the mass population, all of us, whether we're aware of it or not.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd have to agree with you on that. But would you say that would break down into individual therapy, family, or group?
That would be group. That would be the group.
Thank you. Next up, a couple fighting over who left the laundry in the washer for 3 days.
Gee, nobody's ever experienced that. I think part of it is it would be couples therapy, of course. But I think a lot of times what I've seen with couples, what I've seen with myself in my marriage, is that when when you kind of get really irritated or argue over some little thing like that there's really unresolved stuff underneath that hasn't been addressed. And so if you're feeling disconnected from each other, or something happened 3 days ago that hurt your feelings and you didn't bring it up and you didn't resolve it with the other person, then when you see the laundry in the washing machine and it's still wet and it's 3 days old and it's starting to smell, you can get angry over that when you really needed to resolve something else that was more hurtful underneath. Because I don't know if you have this experience, but I do. And I think many people do. Not that little things can't be irritating because we're just human. But when you're in a really good place with your partner, that stuff doesn't matter.
No. So, couples therapy it is. All right. Thank you. And how about the neighbor's dog won't stop barking at invisible squirrels? Who goes to therapy for that?
Well, you might not go to therapy. You might go to your neighbor. You might go to your neighbor and ask them that they do something about their dog. And if that doesn't work, I think it's probably not a therapy issue unless, that would be my sense. And it might be going to the city and saying, are there ordinances about noise? And, but, I'd try the peaceful, friendly approach first. And we had a neighbor when I lived in Santa Fe, where I don't live there anymore, but who wanted a farm on his property in the middle of town. And he had many, many animals in his very small plot of land, and the whole neighborhood smelled like manure.
Oof.
And I lived right behind him. I could not open my windows. And we all talked to him. He had no interest in changing what he was doing. And so finally we all signed a petition and went to the city. Sometimes you have to take action. It's okay to stand up for your rights. It's okay to stand up for what you believe in. And hopefully without doing harm, but being powerful. It's okay to be powerful.
Yeah, I love that. It's okay to take action whenever it's needed, but don't jump to conclusions necessarily.
Right. Like try to work it out peacefully. Try that, because if that works, yay, win-win.
Yeah, I love it. And let's see, I've got one more question, but it comes after this. So now that you've proven you can bring therapy to any room, whether it's the family dinner table, or the table hall, or the halls of Congress, or the neighborhood block, which is why today we're giving you the title of the Nation's Therapist of Hope. So it's to help reflect both your professional expertise and the urgent yet hopeful message that you're bringing for healing America. So, and on that note, I've got to ask Phyllis, the name of this podcast is Retrieving Sanity, and we explore how all facets of living life impact mental health, looking at the incredible motley adventures of your life what does retrieving sanity personally mean to you today, and what's one practice or perspective you believe is crucial for anyone on that journey?
Well, retrieving sanity for me, and I don't ever say that what is true for me is true for everyone. We have different paths. But if my truth is helpful to you, as many other people's truths have been helpful to me, I will say that remembering what happened to me and doing therapy was absolutely critical to my retrieving my own sanity. And in the process of that, and I always had a deep spiritual connection, even as a child, that really grew when I did therapy and when I began to heal from some of the worst effects of what had happened to me. And having that deep inner connection to my own essence was the other huge factor in retrieving my sanity, and still is, because it's an ongoing process. It's not like you recovered. You're not done. I'm not done. Anyway, I think it's a lifelong process, and finding people who are on your own wavelength, who are not one up and not one down, but who are really your equals and share the journey with you. That is absolutely, for me, has been also a critical element of my own retrieving sanity. And I love the title of your podcast.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that with us, and thank you for just giving us even more hope, because it really is about kind of just starting a fire with a spark of hope, right?
Right. And it was reading other people's stories. Originally, I read tons of books before I even knew about psychology or went to therapy. And all the books I read were about people reclaiming their lives from something that had happened that was tragic or difficult. And they gave me hope.
Yeah. And hopefully we're able to give a whole bunch of other people hope with this conversation and the one to follow. So, right. Phyllis, I thank you very much for being on the show today, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you in the future. And I really hope that we can get America in therapy, because I think we all need it.
I'm there with you now.
Yep.
Thank you so much for having me. It's just been an absolute pleasure and an honor to talk with you.
Of course, everyone out there, thank you for stopping by Retrieving Sanity and listening to us. And as always, you gotta love yourself. Try to love others if you can, but you gotta love yourself first. And hopefully you've got a little something out of this conversation. Don't forget to join the Discord, and we will see you next week. Much love. Sean.